Hey guys, Amanda here, Masters in Marriage and Family Therapy. Parents, a question for you. What is your parenting style? Do you have one? Better yet, do you know that there are 4 parenting styles? And why does it matter? Well, because these 4 parenting styles, there is one specific one that will produce high-functioning, assertive adults who have self-control and that are competent. And today, you are going to figure out what the 4 are, which one you identify with, and what you need to do today in order for you to become that one special parenting style so that you can help your child, your teenager, to be a successful adult. So we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right to it. There's this woman, her name is Diana Baumrind, and she is a clinical and developmental psychologist. And she came up with the first 2, which is authoritarian and authoritative. And then after, 2 people named McCoby and Martin added the permissive and the uninvolved parent. So we are going to do it like this. I'm going to define them all for you, and then I'm going to give you biblical examples because the Bible has great stories and you're going to even further understand the definition. I'm also going to give you examples of my clients, and then you need to stay tuned for this part because I'm going to ask you specific questions that I want you to answer there in the comfort of your home or your car or your shower so that you can figure out which one you identify with. Sounds good? Okay, so here we go. We're going to start with the permissive parent. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time if I get the spelling wrong. The permissive parent is high warmth, low control. These parents are lenient. They avoid confrontation at all costs. Few rules, minimal guidance. These parents are more concerned about being their child's friend than their child's parent. And it's usually because they're trying to compensate for something that they themselves lacked in their childhood. For example, I had a father who, ever since he was a little boy, I'm talking little, like 5, 6, 7, he would wake up super early in the morning to do hard labor at his father's farm. And he hated doing that. But it did create in him discipline and determination and perseverance. Now, of course, it was excessive, it was exaggerated, and it was way too much. However, when he had children of his own, he said, they will not have to go through what I went through. And I agree, not to that extent, but instead, he took away all of their hardships. He took away every possible thing that could be a learning point in their life. He just made their lives very easy, and because of it, it was to their disadvantage because they were completely and utterly helpless when confronting life's problems. You see, the problem with these permissive parents is that they lack a sort of involvement in their children's life. They lack the ability to follow through and to be consistent. They really lack confidence in their parenting ability, and because of this, it produces behavioral problems in their children. This child to teenager to adult will become bossy, dependent, impulsive, lack self-control, low achievement, failure to learn, perseverance, and a low emotional IQ. So what's the next one? The next one is the uninvolved parent. Uninvolved. Every time I spell these words, it looks wrong to me, but maybe it's because it's in capital letters. But the uninvolved parent is low in warmth, low in control, low in communication, low in nurture, and high in do whatever you want, Johnny. There is total freedom in this household. And maybe the kids will be like, wow, this is pretty awesome. You know, I can do whatever I want. I can sleep wherever I want. I can eat wherever I want. I can do as I please. However, as they start getting older, and even for little children to teenagers, just start to realize, listen, I don't have any protection. I don't have any consistency. I don't have a foundation. And they start to have all sorts of struggles and problems with identity, who they are, where they belong. They don't know their left hand from their right hand because they have never heard of things such as rules and boundaries and limitations. You see, these parents really have no interest in being parents. And at its most drastic form, it's really neglect. These parents produce children who are depressed, who have aggressive behaviors, delinquents, they're hostile, they have attention problems. This is the uninvolved parent. And then we have the next one, it's the authoritarian. Authoritarian. These parents are very strict. There is minimal negotiation that is going on in that household. High expectation, limited flexibility, frequent punishment, and there is only a one-way communication, and it's this. It is either my way or the highway. Low warmth, but high control, as says researcher Baumrind, 1991. Now, I'm going to tell you some researchers' names. I don't know if you're interested in it. But I'm going to attach some articles, some links down below so that you can get more information if you'd like. Well, these children, these parents tend to be not warm at all. You know when the Bible says, "Come, let us reason"? Yeah, there's no reasoning with these parents. And because of it, the children of these parents tend to be hostile, rebellious, antisocial aggression. The excessive control produces anxiety, as says Barlow, 1998, and low warmth in these parents produce depression, as was studied by Rappy, 1997. Not good stuff in the authoritarian parent. But then there's the authoritative parent. The authoritative parent is the goal. They have high warmth and high control. They're reasonable and nurturing. They have high expectations, but they have clear rules. They engage in frequent communication with their children. These are the type of parents that create an environment, a space at the dinner table to say, "Hey, how was your day at school? And what teachers are you struggling with? Where's your homework? Can I see it?" These parents know their children's friend's name, and they know that their kid likes kale instead of spinach. They know that what things are keeping their kids up at night. These parents are involved. And because of it, they produce competent, mature, assertive adults who are able to reason, who have both a moral reasoning and a moral conscience and pro-social behavior. And this is where we want to be as parents. You know why? Because when your kids are little and you tell them to brush their teeth, they kind of do it because you're telling them to, right? When I get those little finger toothbrush and I put it on River and Reed's two little front and bottom teeth, they have no idea what's going on. I simply brush it. And they let me, well, because they don't really have a choice. And as they get older, they're going to have more understanding as to why they brush their teeth. But you see, it's going to become a big problem if they're in their 30s or 40s and someone says, "Hey, why are you brushing your teeth?" And they say, "Oh, because mom and dad said so," right? No, the authoritative parents gives reason. They try to explain questions. They explain the why questions of life, and I know that that is many and plenty. The authoritative parent takes time to parent. And the busy world that is this world, being an authoritative parent takes time, and it takes a lot of hard work, really. So now, let's break this down even further by using, as I told you guys, biblical examples that will clarify it even more. So the first one is the permissive parent. And I believe that the best example is Eli the priest. His story is found in 1 Samuel, and interestingly enough, all of our examples will come from either 1 or 2 Samuel. So it says here that Eli, his job, right, was to minister at their tabernacle. The people would come with their sacrifices and their offerings, and he was the spiritual leader, and he had 2 sons. But these 2 sons, Lord have mercy, they did literally whatever they wanted. Why? Because they had very few rules, and because they had very few guidance. And because of it, these boys would sexually exploit the women who would come to bring their sacrifices to God. Not only that, but the meat, the good meat that belonged to God, they would take it and eat it themselves. And Eli, what did he do? Absolutely nothing. He avoided confrontation. He just patted them on the back and tapped them on the head. He was very lenient. He was more concerned about being their friend. So much so that God had to get involved because Eli was not doing anything. And it says here, 1 Samuel 2, verse 29, God looks to Eli and says, "You honor your sons more than you honor me." In other words, you are more concerned with pleasing your boys than you are in pleasing me. And because you are not giving them rules and boundaries and limits, look, Eli, they are ruining themselves. And so God intervenes, and the story is not a happy ending, but ultimately these 2 boys die. And when Eli hears the news of their death, and also that the ark had been taken, he's a very old man in his 90s. He's sitting there in the balcony, and he falls backward, and he also dies. Now, this Bible is interesting because it gives commentaries that I like. And this woman here, commenting on the story, writes something that I want you to listen closely to what she says. It says this: "Those who follow their own inclination and blind affection for their children." Oh, I love that. Blind affection for their children, indulging them in gratification of their selfish desires, and do not bring them to bear the authority of God to rebuke sin and correct evil, make it manifest that they are honoring their children more than they are honoring God. And then she concludes, "He," being Eli, "should have first attempted to restrain evil by mild measures," right? Talk to them, explain it to them, mild consequences. However, if these were of no avail, if he tried and it didn't work, and we won't know if it would have worked because he never even tried. But if it was of not avail, he should have subdued the wrong by the severest means. He had to put a stop to it, and he did it. And it was for his destruction and the destruction of his children. Parents, do we have blind affection towards our children? Are we thinking by being their buddy, their pals, and their friends, are we being negligent and parenting them at a time where children and teenagers need parents? That's the permissive. Now, what is the next one here? Well, before I do that, I'm going to ask you the questions that I said I was going to ask you to see if you fit in the permissive parent. Here it goes. Do you set limits and rules for your child? But do you often compromise your rules to accommodate your child's mood? Here's the next one. Do you avoid conflict with your child? Do you have more of a willingness to be their best friend than to be their parent? Oh, and check this one out. Do you often bribe your children, your teenager, with large rewards for something minimal like make your bed, do your chore, and then you bribe them with this huge reward? Are you a permissive parent if you set rules in the household, and because your kid complains and murmurs, sooner or later there is no consistency in your rules, and then you just said, you know what, just go ahead and do it because you're trying to avoid conflict? I had a mother come to me, and she was struggling because her son was just hitting his jewel all day and smoking weed. It seems like it's the same thing every week, right, that I tell you guys. But there's a lot of cases. I mean, this isn't one family. This is several families that I deal with weekly with the same issues. And I told Mom, I said, Mom, do you agree that your son partakes in these things? And she says, not at all, I hate it. And I said, well, he doesn't have a car, so how is he getting this stuff? Is he meeting his friend in the corner? Is a drug dealer coming to your house? Like, he's not going to school, he doesn't work. How could he possibly get his hands on these things? And then Mother puts her face down, quite ashamed in this moment, and she says, well, I drive him to the gas station myself. And I said, what? I genuinely couldn't hear her. And maybe I did hear her, but I try to believe like I did. And I said, wait, what did you say? And she says, well, I go and I drive him myself. And I said, well, what in the world? Why? You told me you didn't agree with it. She says, honestly, Amanda, just to avoid confrontation. Do you have a difficulty saying no? That's the permissive parent. What's the next one? The uninvolved. And honestly, this is just straight up neglect. These people should not be parents. I truly believe, sincerely and wholeheartedly, that not everyone should be a parent. Before you start making babies, figure out if that is you. Because it takes a whole lot of work and a whole lot of selflessness to be a parent. And so the example that comes to mind for that is King David. Oh Lord, King David. Now there's a lot of reasons why he fits the uninvolved parent, but I'm just going to give you two. So King David has a son. This son ends up raping King David's daughter. And you know what King David does about it? Absolutely nothing. He does absolutely nothing. 3 years go by. Well, 2 years. 2 years go by, and he still does absolutely nothing. And then this time, his other son, right? He had lots of sons. He had lots of wives. His other son, Absalom, was so angry. He was so ticked off and pissed off that his dad did nothing to avenge the rape of his baby sister. He allows for 2 years to go by and does nothing. And so Absalom says, you know what? I'm going to take matters into my own hand. And he goes and murders his brother. Can you imagine? And then you would think that now David, right? I mean, it seems like the man is dead, so maybe he resurrected from the dead and now he's going to do something. He's going to get involved. Still remains uninvolved. His son flees. Instead of making his son go through the consequences as the first son should have, his son flees and he acts as though nothing happens. His son flees and for 3 years he's distant. He then comes back to Jerusalem where his father is. He even asks one of his servants saying, hey, I want to meet up with dad. I want to talk to good old dad. I want to see him. I want to have a conversation. David does not want to do that. 2 years go by, then 3 years go by, and David seems to keep running away from solving the drastic issues in his household. Long story short, Absalom at this point, he commits treason. He's trying to go after his father's kingdom. His father has to run away, and in the end, you know what happens? They start to have a war, a battle with each other. Absalom is there riding in a mule. His hair gets caught in the branches of a tree. He is caught between heaven and earth. And Joab, I think that was his name, is one of David's servants, sees him, grabs 3 spears from his spear holder, and thrusts it in the heart of Absalom. And David weeps bitterly. And these are the consequences of uninvolved parent. These children become aggressive, delinquent, hostile. Absalom knew that what his brother did, raping his sister, was something that was completely ridiculous, that it should have never happened. And good old dad does nothing about it and leads his son. Yes, it was his own choice, but leads his son to go after and murder, take things with his own hands. Uninvolved. So what's the next one? The authoritarian parent. The authoritarian. And the best example to me was when I think of King Saul. You know, King Saul was definitely the because I say so, my way or the highway. And he had a son named Jonathan. And after a while, he started doing what he well pleased, and God was not okay with it. And he was going to lose the throne. He was going to lose his kingdom to King David, right? But this is at the time where King David had some sense in him. And Saul is not happy, and he blames David, even though he should be blaming himself. And his son Jonathan starts seeing that there is a very drastic difference between his father and David. And he starts to have just a kind affection towards David because he sees him as a man of integrity, as a man of character. He honestly starts looking up to David. But Saul several times tries to kill David, and Jonathan is always protecting. Jonathan is always protecting him, right? Until finally, Saul's like, Jonathan, you're a fool. This guy is trying to take away the kingdom from you. If we move him out of your place, you're going to get to rule. But Jonathan wasn't about that. Jonathan was his own man. Jonathan no longer listened to his father because his father was telling him to do something and behave a certain way, but his father had a life that was not consistent. His father was just very strict, did not engage in conversation with him. And eventually, he is removed from the throne. David is now in the throne, and him and Jonathan remain very good friends. Now, I forgot to do this for the uninvolved, so we're going to backtrack a little bit here. And I'm going to ask you some questions about the uninvolved, okay? The uninvolved, the questions is this. Do you have an understanding of what is going on in your child's life? Do you know the things that he's doing in school or at home? Unfortunately, I have a lot of clients, you have a lot of parents that are completely uninvolved. I have mothers and fathers calling me and saying, Amanda, I have no idea what my kid wants to do therapy, but they want to do therapy, and when I start talking to their kids are sleeping around, or there's naked photos of them being passed around in school, and I say, do your parents know? Have you told them? Says, oh no, I never get a chance to because they're never home. Are you home when your children are home? Or are you constantly working and out and about trying to give your children the world in terms of financial means, but where they need you most in terms of their emotional, their spiritual, their mental health, you are out to lunch? Would you be falling under the category of uninvolved? And now here are some interesting things about the authoritarian parent, which is the one we just talked about, that King Saul falls under. You see, King Saul was more concerned about controlling Jonathan's behavior than his heart. Because if he was trying to control his son's heart, he would be the type of father that would demonstrate that through his actions and through his words. But he did not do that. King Saul was more concerned about being the king because of the things that he was going to be given than being the king in order to represent the character of God. And his son immediately spots this, which is why his son no longer obeys him and listens to him. Because his father wasn't concerned about reasoning and having a conversation. He was just concerned about power. And Jonathan was not that kind of guy. You see, the authoritarian parent thinks that by yelling and screaming and threatening through control, manipulation, and fear that they're going to get their kid to do something. And that might work when they're little, but as they become teenagers and adults, that will no longer work. Authoritarian parents, are you more concerned about behavior modification than you are about heart transformation? I love it what it says here. Changing the heart is a willing decision from within and cannot be forced from without. So your first goal is to work with your child's heart. And then finally, the authoritative parent, and it is my prayer that all of us would fall under this category. The authoritative parent, the best example, and there are many examples in the Bible, but Hannah, remember, she was the mother of Samuel. And Samuel, she gave Samuel at 12 years old to the service of God. And Samuel was there involved with Eli. Remember Eli, the guy who was permissive? Well, Samuel was there involved in everything that was going on. So I'm pretty certain that he oftentimes engaged with the rebels of a son that was the sons of Eli. However, the Bible records that Samuel, his record is one of faithfulness, obedience, and devotion because he had an authoritative mother who prayed with him, who nurtured him, who had high expectations but was reasonable, who encouraged him with affirmation and kindness and gifts and quality time. What also brings to mind is Mordecai. He wasn't the father of Esther, but he was like a father figure to Esther. And Esther went on to do amazing things. She went on to save the Jews at the cost of her very life. Oh, and then you have King Ahab. King Ahab was just an excellent father, and he produced his son, which was King Jehoshaphat, who did such incredible things. You can read their story in Chronicles. Authoritative parents will produce and create children who have a brain that thinks for themselves, but a brain that is totally and radically in submission to the will of God. And well, ask yourselves these questions if you are the authoritative parent. Does your child's day have structure? Is there a planned bedtime, right? I'm talking about the younger kids. I know that every single night River and Reed will go to bed between 7 and 7:30. Is there structure to your child's day, to your teenager's day? Does your child understand the expectations that you have for their behavior? And are these expectations reasonable? There's a lot of parents that are making all sorts of rules that really don't make any sense. Are your rules reasonable? And have you created a rule that you are also willing to follow? And finally, do you have a healthy and open line of communication with your child? Does your child feel that they can speak to you about anything without fear of negative consequences or harsh judgments? Now, I want you to take that with a grain of sand. Your kids will oftentimes tell you things, and they're going to need to suffer the natural consequences of those things, and I'm sure they're going to also have other consequences. But are they comfortable enough going to you knowing that regardless of what they did, that though you love them unconditionally, you did not accept their sin or that act unconditionally, and that you are going to be fair in their punishment? That's what I'm talking about. So here it is. And I think it's been made very clear. Permissive, uninvolved, authoritarian, and authoritative. So I want to do something a little different today. I want to pray with you right now. And my prayer is going to be that God would make of me and you parents that are authoritative, that have the wisdom and discernment to parent the same way that our Heavenly Father parents us. Let's bow. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, make us authoritative parents. Give us the wisdom and discernment to lead, to be kind in our words. Oh Lord, you have given us a very special job, but it's a job of high responsibility, that is to raise children who will become teenagers, and teenagers who will become adults, who will then parent their own children. So Lord, I ask that you would make us parents after your own heart. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Hey, if this was useful to you, if you found value in it, I'm going to ask you what I always ask you. Click like, share, subscribe. And you know when you subscribe to the channel, make sure you turn on that little button so that weekly you will receive the notification, because every week a new video will be on that YouTube channel. God bless you guys.